The people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory. Tonight, we're seeing all over this nation, all cities and all parts of the country, indeed across the world, an outpouring of joy, of hope, renewed faith in tomorrow. Bring a better day.
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch. And it wasn't the landslide that some expected, and it was a rollercoaster ride. But in the end, it was Joe Biden who pulled off a nail-biting victory, with the networks calling it for him around midday on Saturday, US time. And with the verdict finally clear, it was Biden who promised to govern for all Americans and urged the warring sides to make peace.
It's time to put away the harsh rhetoric, lower the temperature, see each other again, listen to each other again. The Bible tells us, to everything there's a season, a time to build, a time to reap and a time to sow, and a time to heal. This is the time to heal in America.
And what are the chances of that happening? Not so good. 2 days earlier, with Biden still trailing in some key battleground states, crowds of Trump supporters in Georgia, Michigan and Arizona were doing their best to thwart the democratic process, urging that counting be either stopped or continued. And turbocharging their anger was Trump himself, who on election night had threatened legal action and complained that victory had been stolen from them.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election.
Soon after, Trump had bombarded his followers on Twitter and Facebook with the same baseless claims.
They are working hard to make a 500,000 vote advantage in Pennsylvania disappear ASAP. Likewise, Michigan and others. Stop the count. Stop the fraud.
So, what did the US media do with those falsehoods? Twitter and Facebook slapped them down hard, with more than a dozen tweets branded disputed and misleading. And the big TV networks also showed zero tolerance for the president's claims, interrupting his speech live as it went to air to call him out. MSNBC's Brian Williams told viewers,
"We are reluctant to step in, but duty-bound to point out when he says we did win this election, we've already won, that is not based in the facts at all."
And on CNN, Jake Tapper was also quick to crush the president's fantasies and falsehoods.
He did not win. He has not won. The president falsely depicting the counting of votes as a fraud and an embarrassment. That is not what is going on.
At the opposite end of the political spectrum, on the Murdoch's Fox News, Chris Wallace also condemned the president for feeding his supporters fury.
This is an extremely flammable situation, and the president just threw a match into it. He hasn't won these states.
But back in Australia, on Fox's sister network, the reaction was live and let lie. As Trump claimed fraud and victory, Sky News made no immediate attempt to slap him down or question his attack on American democracy, with the network happily repeating his comments in its straplines and Peter Credlin welcoming Trump's legal threats with a gratuitous sideswipe at the left.
Wow, what a speech. Straight into the Supreme Court there. You can hear the gnashing of the teeth down in Soho and over on the west coast in California. What did you make of it, Paul?
That sound you can hear is exploding heads on CNN.
Next day, Joe Hockey, our former ambassador to Washington, was telling 2GB's Ben Fordham,
"It's a mess."
So there's a chance that electoral fraud has happened?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there will be. But the question is whether it's enough to change the election outcome. And I doubt it is.
And Alan Jones was soon going all in on Sky in support of the president's claims.
Many were saying before the election that Trump's concerns about potential voter fraud were exaggerated. In the light of these dramatic changes in the last 24 hours, and I've been around a long time in this stuff, it appears to me Trump's comments may have been understated.
That remark and similar comments on Jones's program went out on YouTube to Trump supporters to be viewed around 3 million times. And also backing Trump's claim of a victory stolen by fraud was News Corp's Miranda Devine in New York.
How do we know that it didn't have an effect? How do we know that, 10,000 here and 10,000 there didn't make the difference in such an incredibly close election when there's been a concerted effort by Democrats to, hide the counting of the ballots?
But to his credit, Sky's Andrew Bolt was not buying into Trump's refusal to accept that he could indeed have lost.
I hope that Donald Trump will leave the White House with dignity. I hope that he will stop recklessly claiming he's been cheated out of a win. Americans and Australians, we just all got to back off this hyper-partisanship, where there's only one thing that counts, that your side wins. In this instance, democracy must win, faith in democracy.
As the weekend approached, with the results still on a razor's edge, Trump addressed the American people for a second time. And as we waited for him to take the podium, CNN's man at the White House, Jim Acosta, gave viewers this extraordinary guide to what to expect.
What you're about to hear from the President of the United States may not be in line with the facts, may be hazardous to your democracy, may be hazardous to the counting of the votes. I suspect that, when the President comes out here, we're going to see a fair amount of bending of the truth.
And sure enough, just as CNN predicted, we did.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
NBC, MSNBC, CBS and ABC all stopped showing the president's press conference well before he was done. So outlandish were his claims, with CNBC's Shepard Smith saying,
"Well, we're interrupting this because what the President of the United States is saying, in large part, is absolutely untrue. He began, and we're not going to allow it to keep going because it's not true."
Amazing stuff. But CNN stuck with Trump as he rambled to the end. Then as the president departed, Jake Tapper delivered this withering response.
What a sad night for the United States of America to hear their president say that, to falsely accuse people of trying to steal the election, to try to attack democracy that way with this feast of falsehoods. Lie after lie after lie. It's not true. It's ugly. It's frankly pathetic.
And CNN's news anchor, Anderson Cooper, was in complete stunned agreement.
That is the President of the United States. That is the most powerful person in the world. And we see him like an obese turtle on his back, flailing in the hot sun, realizing his time is over.
Back home, there's been criticism of the ABC for not calling out Trump's false claims more aggressively. And some of it has been justified. But after that speech, the ABC's Andrew Probyn could not have been clearer with his verdict.
He was using the language of a despot, not the leader of, supposedly, of the free world.
And it wasn't just the mainstream media trying to damp it down. A group called Stop the Steal, with some 360,000 members, was shut down on Thursday by Facebook, who said some posts had been calling for violence. And one of the group's backers, Women for Trump co-founder Amy Kremer, then tweeted,
"Big tech is shutting down our ability to communicate with other real Donald Trump supporters."
So, did any of this cause the commentators at Sky to damp down their rhetoric? Not at all. At 6 p.m. on Friday, Rowan Dean told viewers,
"I never thought I would see an attempted political coup in the greatest democracy on earth, the USA. Yet increasingly, that is what it is looking like."
But Murdoch's New York Post, which endorsed Trump for the election, certainly did have second thoughts. It repeatedly called Trump's charge of fraud baseless and unfounded. It branded a tweet by Donald Trump Jr. calling for total war as panic-stricken and clueless. And in a Saturday editorial, it declared,
"President Trump, your legacy is secure. Stop the stolen election rhetoric."
Noting the change, the New York Times asked,
"What happened?"
and answered,
"In short, the president appears to be going down, and the Post is not about to go with him."
The New York Times reported that 2 Post insiders claimed their editors had told staff to get tougher on Trump. And Fox News was doing the same, with its early decision to call Arizona for Biden also sparking tensions with the Trump campaign.
Are you 100% sure of that call and when you made it, and why did you make it?
Absolutely. We made it after basically a half hour of debating, is it time yet? Because it's been clear for a while.
Reports suggested Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, had phoned Rupert Murdoch personally to challenge the call. But Fox stuck to its guns. Back in Australia, the Trump boosters on Sky were still waving the flag, as they had been since Election Day. And back in those early stages of the count, as Trump took Florida by a comfortable margin and held huge leads in Michigan, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, none had gloated more than Chris Kenney.
So this has been a big win for mainstream values against the elites. It's been a big win for democracy against a media push and a so-called elites push to tell them what they were going to do. And I've got to tell you, if you weren't watching Sky News in Australia, this will all come as an absolute surprise to you.
Andrew Bolt in the Herald Sun was also cheering.
Ha ha! Donald Trump seems to have won again. Celebrate with me and let's hammer home the lessons. Some gloating will be unavoidable.
Meanwhile, Graham Richardson on Sky was asking plaintively,
Is every single poll wrong? And I just don't believe that.
But half an hour later, he was far less sure.
I'm not panicking, but I am reaching for the rosary beads, I've got to say that.
And 30 minutes after that, he was assuming Biden was cooked.
If ever I saw someone not destined to make history, it'd be Joe Biden.
It certainly wasn't the Biden landslide that some had predicted. And the question on everyone's lips was, how had the polls got it wrong again?
Do you mean the polls that said Brexit couldn't happen? The polls that said Trump could never ever win in 2016?
But by the weekend, as a tide of postal votes turned red states blue, it was clear the polls had got some things right. The pollsters, averaged by 538 and Real Clear Politics, said Georgia was a toss-up. And it was, with Biden looking like he will scrape home. They gave Joe a good chance of victory in Arizona and Nevada, and they got that right too. And they also had him winning in Pennsylvania, albeit by a much bigger margin than he's got. But they did get it badly wrong in Florida, where they made Biden favourite, but Trump coasted home, and the forecast was 5 points out. And the pollsters were out by 6 or 7 points in Michigan and Wisconsin, where Biden did win, but not by much. So why did they underestimate Trump's support for the second time in 4 years? Former Mitt Romney advisor Lanhee Chen told Planet America the shy Trump voter is the key.
I don't think pollsters are getting a straight answer oftentimes when they're asking people who they're supporting. And this notion of the shy Trump voter is real.
Many pollsters dispute that. But the questions asked by polling companies, Trafalgar and Rasmussen, who gave Trump a better and indeed too much chance of winning, give some credence to that claim. Rasmussen used a pre-recorded voice in the belief that people would be more honest with a robot. And in the past, Trafalgar has used a roundabout method to get at what people really feel, as Planet America's Chaz Licciardello explained.
Essentially, it's stuff like, who do you think your neighbours might vote for? And you don't know who your neighbours are going to vote for, but their theory is that a lot of people don't want to talk to pollsters. And if they do, they don't want to tell them the truth. And they're more likely to tell them the truth if you distance the person from the information they're giving.
New polls run by the University of Southern California use a similar technique, asking people who their social circle would vote for. And they claim it has predicted election outcomes better in 5 recent elections, including the 2016 US presidential race and the 2018 US election for the House of Representatives. But ex-News poll chief Martin O'Shannessy believes it's not that simple. He says it's the state polls that are most inaccurate, and they are just not done well enough.
To do a good job, one would need to conduct a reliable, live-operator telephone poll using mobiles and landlines of, say, 1,000 interviews in each of the 50 states shortly before the election. This is very expensive. So we observe that state polls tend to be done cheaply and erratically.
So what now for the pollsters and the folks in the media who love to make them news? Peter Lewis from Essential Media says polls should be used to inform political reporting, but not to predict political outcomes.
As a pollster, I think the right questions can deliver rich insights, but who is going to win is not one of them.
But The Guardian's data journalist Mona Chalabi says we should all give up relying on them.
I do not know how many times polls have to be wrong or how wrong they have to be for us to finally walk away from the dangerous seduction of predicting political outcomes.
And talking of political outcomes, where now for America? And will Trump's traditional boosters back his claims of fraud and theft? So far, Fox News certainly isn't doing so in its news broadcasts or on its website, but star Fox commentators like Sean Hannity are still claiming fraud. And Breitbart is also running hard with the claim that Trump voters were cheated of a win, as you can see from some of its most popular stories. Meanwhile, Alex Jones at InfoWars, which has millions of followers, is going even harder about election theft and the false Biden victory. And remarkably, as world leaders congratulate Biden on his victory, commentators on Sky News in Australia are also refusing to accept he has won, or crying the fight wasn't fair, with comments like these.
People are never going to have faith in a Biden president because there are always going to be doubts around it.
You can't expect that the president is going to roll over right now and concede.
There clearly was fraud on the night of the election, both electronically and physically, with all the rorting going in Biden's direction. A stolen election.
That sort of nonsense is really just embarrassing, and it's a disgrace that Sky News management keeps putting it to air. We'll see if the network's rabid opinion hosts continue to pin their credibility on a man who now has none, or whether they'll be mature enough to recognise the democratic will of American voters who gave Joe Biden more votes than any other president in history and 4 million more than his rival. That's all from us tonight. There's more on our website where you can stream or download the programme and read statements from our pollsters. And don't forget, Media Bites every Thursday on your favourite social media platform. But for now, until next week, goodbye.